I've seen in my inquiries as to your background.
That's right, I am.
You're one of us, good. So you recognise the background then?
Yeah, just. With a bit of difficulty, I recognise it.
So Nicole Maor is the director of the Israel Reform Movement's Legal Aid Centre for Olim, that's new immigrants. And welcome to this little interview for the purposes of Limmud Oz.
Thanks, nice to be here.
Now, your Legal Aid Centre was established in 1992, I believe, after Operation Solomon. And I mention that because lately I've been doing a succession of programs about Operation Solomon. I've spoken to the author of a book on the Operation Solomon, and I've just this morning interviewed a shlicha in Philadelphia who's Ethiopian. So I've gone out on this 30th anniversary of Operation Solomon to do quite a lot of coverage about the Ethiopians, and we might get to that a little bit later on as we talk. Now, you're born and raised in Sydney, I understand, Nicole. You made Aliyah in 1989, a long time ago, and you were admitted to the Israeli bar in 1992. You've got a master's degree in international law and international relations. With the bashing Israel gets under international law, that could be handy. During your period as director of the Legal Aid Centre for Olim, you've advised and represented more than 100,000 new immigrants and earned LACO, or the Legal Aid Centre for Olim, a reputation as the leading organisation for new immigration rights, particularly regarding issues relating to the Interior Ministry and conversion. Now, you're well known as one of Israel's most expert immigration attorneys, and so it's great that Limmud Oz have procured your services in a couple of weeks' time. So can you please tell us a little bit about what you do in your work at Iraq and their Legal Aid Centre for Olim?
Well, you know, Israel is very, very good at allowing people to come into the country. I mean, you have the law of return, which is one of the most broadly, one of the only laws in the world really that allows people from all around the world to get automatic citizenship. But when we started our work in 1992, which was really together with both Operation Solomon, but also with the huge influx of new immigrants from the former Soviet Union, we realized that there was a gap between the services given to people until they got into the country and then what would happen when they landed in Israel. And so actually when we started our work, it was more to help those who had already made Aliyah fit into society and deal with the difficult realities of being absorbed into a new country. But in the later periods of time, the last sort of 10 years or so, we've actually taken a step back and gone back to helping those who actually want to try and make Aliyah. Because as Israel let in over 1 million people between 1990 and 2000, they're now sort of taken a step back and not being quite so happy in allowing people to make Aliyah, and they're making life a lot more difficult. So we've actually taken a step back and now trying to help more people make Aliyah. And that's, of course, where the whole question of who is a Jew comes in, who was a convert, which are the topics that I'll be talking about in the lecture.
Yeah, so you've just led into that quite nicely for us. Yeah, as you say, the topic for your presentation at Limmud will be recognising non-Orthodox conversions for the purpose of Aliyah, landslide win or landslide disaster. Now, I interviewed Times of Israel analyst Haviv Rettig-Gur straight after this particular event where the High Court made its decision last March. Now, with your Limmud session, you're going to explore the implications of this decision. One would get the initial impression, great, we've now got this law that's been passed, let's move on to other things. But you're going to talk about some of the legal and political and social implications of this. Do you want to give us without giving too much away, of course, of your talk, otherwise people won't turn up, let's hear about some of the ramifications that may surprise people about this law.
Well, it actually isn't a law; it's a judgment, and that's the huge difference. And it's not a surprise for those in the field that it took the Israeli Supreme Court 15 years to hand down this decision because it's such a political hot potato. And one of the reasons why they took so long in making the decision was knowing that if they do give a decision, is this going to automatically result in the Knesset making a law that will basically overturn the decision? And the question is what is better, a limbo of no decision or a decision that's likely to cause all sorts of political chaos as a result? And that's really the question that the Supreme Court dealt with, that we dealt with coming to the Supreme Court and trying to put pressure on them to make a decision. And now, of course, in the Israeli political system, where we may or may not have having a new government in the next few days, will be a question of how much the whole issue of conversion is going to be on the table. Because if it is on the table, and it may well be on the table, then the decision to the Supreme Court is going to basically be one of those decisions that will light any fuse that is already dormant on the table.
So just going back to what happened at the time, one particular comment, of course, they may not be in the government now, but they'll still get an opportunity to speak in the Knesset. There was a statement from Likud that said, this High Court decision is scandalous, will bring disaster upon us. I'm quoting Likud's coalition chairman, Nicky. Now, although he's not personally Haredi, he sits on the party's right flank on religious issues. He claimed that anyone anywhere in the world will now go to a reform rabbi, receive permission to immigrate to Israel within 30 days, and it's clear that in a short time Israel will no longer be Jewish and democratic. So,
well, you know, that shows his ignorance more than anything else. You know, and the fact that many of Israel's politicians try to jump on the bandwagon. Non-Orthodox conversions have been recognized for the purpose of Aliyah since the 1980s. For conversions performed outside of Israel. So the fact that the Supreme Court has now said they're recognized also if they're performed inside Israel hasn't actually changed the fact that non-Orthodox conversions have been recognized by the State of Israel for more than 20 years. So this, and this is one of the arguments that we put before the Supreme Court throughout the years, is that there isn't really a change of the status quo. Where the change of the status quo is only in terms of its internal Israeli politics, because the Israeli movement, for the Israeli reform movement, the Israeli reform movement's conversions are exactly the same as Australia's reform conversions, which have been recognized for the purpose of Aliyah for over 20 years.
So when you say that there are some ramifications, do you seriously think that there's a threat of this law being overturned by the Knesset, given that we've got now the likelihood of a government which won't have enough of those numbers from the right able to do that? Wouldn't the threat be diminished?
Look, it's always a threat, and it's been a threat for the last 20 years. At the moment, we're hoping that there are enough more important issues for this new government to deal with than the issue of conversion. But it's interesting to know that conversion has never, ever been legislated. There's never been a law that determines who is a convert, and for numerous reasons, amongst other reasons, the desire not to offend the Jewish world outside of Israel. And hopefully with this present government, they're smart enough and savvy enough and aware that there is such a gap at the moment between Israel and world Jewry that they're not going to put flames on the fire. But when the decision was handed down on the 1st of March, the political situation was quite different. And who knows whether the current political situation is going to change, is going to last for more than a few months anyway. So it's always going to be a political question. And I'll talk about why it's a political hot potato and what are the ramifications if a law is passed and if a law isn't passed. Okay, so that's
putting you're dangling a little bit there for our audience, so they know what they can get by coming to presentation. And I just want to ask you, since I said earlier that I've been doing a lot of programs on Ethiopian refugees, you deal with Ethiopian refugees left behind in Ethiopia, and you actually have somebody who works in a department alongside you, your Racism Crisis Centre. where you have an Amharic intake counselor and translator. So you do definitely catering specifically for Ethiopian refugees. Where do you see the situation now? Do you think it's essentially diffused and we've just got maybe a small number that may still gain entry to Israel, but the issue is really going to be off the table?
The issue, unfortunately, isn't off the table. We still are getting about, I don't know, at least 5-10 calls a week from Ethiopian immigrants who have family members still stuck over there because decisions that were made as to who can come in and who can't come in, in many cases are random. And you have cases where you have a person who's all his brothers and sisters and his parents, everybody were allowed to come in the country. When his parents came in, he was under the age of 18, and therefore they said he couldn't come in with them. He had to wait till he was 18. And now that he's over 18, they've said, sorry, you're not on the lists anymore. And this is not just a single case. So we're unfortunately, we're still petitioning the courts. There's still going to be numerous individual cases, but as a group, as a collective, I think, yes, the large number have come in, but there are always going to be those individuals left on the outside, and they're the ones who, of course, are the terrible, heartbreaking cases, which we've always chosen to take on as part of our ideology and as part of our desire to try and make Israel a better place and be open for all Jews around the world who deserve to be there.
Well, kol hakavod for all those efforts to bring everybody to Israel who deserves to come to Israel. You're fighting a fantastic cause there, and I think we should all be supporting it. And we should be getting along to Limmud Oz to hear more about what you have to say.
Looking forward to being there.
Let's look forward to it, Nicole. See you in a couple of weeks' time.
Okay, thanks very much.
Much appreciated. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.